going on, everyone? This is Alex Quinn, and you're listening to the Hustle Inspires Hustle podcast. Today's guest is Josh Troy, founder and CEO of WFS Group, Wires from Strangers, a powerhouse outsourced sales agency working with top info product, coaching, and SaaS brands. Josh started his first video marketing agency at just 21 years old and built it from the ground up using 100% outbound sales. Over the last decade, he's mastered both outbound and inbound strategies, leading teams that bring in tens of millions in high ticket sales every year. Now, he's known for building high performing sales teams and systems that help businesses scale fast and smart. So, let's dive into the mind of one of the top sales leaders in the game. Welcome, Josh.
Awesome. What's up, Alex? Good to be here again, man. I think
Hey,
it
man,
was
I'm so
maybe,
excited to have you back on. People loved your episode last time.
yeah, it's funny about that because thinking about it, that was probably 4 years ago now.
It's a minute ago,
I
yeah.
think that was maybe in 2021. And it's funny because I do get a lot of people still reach out to me about that episode. In fact, what's really interesting is a lot of the times in our hiring and recruiting process, people will look up some content about me, and your episode is one of the ones they often reference. So glad to
Yeah.
be back here.
Hey, man, that makes me really happy. I'm gonna give my team props for having good SEO. And
Absolutely.
let's give some props to Mr. Jeremy Haynes, which is the reason we met. We're both
Yep.
part of his mastermind. You guys have done some incredible work together. Jeremy's completely changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks to the man. We got a mastermind this weekend.
Yeah, Jeremy's the man, one of my closest friends, one of the most highly respected, most talented, prolific media buyers in the entire game. So we do a lot of deals together. He's on the lead gen side, we're on the sales side. Like I said, very close friend. And yeah, I'll be speaking at his mastermind this weekend. I'll see you
Yeah.
in Miami.
Hey, man, so you get a lot of love, not just you, but your agency on Jeremy's channel, and Jeremy moves a ton of people. You're pretty much the only sales agency that he recommends, which is a big deal, man. Wires from Strangers is
Yeah.
making some noise. I remember
Yeah.
a few masterminds ago, you had a crazy ass presentation, man. I was like glued to my notebook taking notes, value packed, and I knew that when the time came, we were gonna have a really solid conversation about me being able to tap into this world that you and Jeremy have been, excelling in. I have a deep background in scaling e-commerce brands, service-based businesses, and done a lot of SEO work. But I've always been curious about jumping into the high ticket offer space. Um, and I'm getting my feet wet now. We're pretty much done with our offer. We after the last mastermind at Jeremy's house, we were like, you know what, we got to stop waiting. We got to stop wasting time and we got to actually try this out because we have too much experience. So, what I want to talk to you about today, Josh, is I want to talk to you today as if I was a complete newbie in sales and marketing, and I'm launching a high ticket offer and I'm talking to one of the biggest experts, and I want to dumb down everything that I need to do. So I have some questions that I want
Yeah.
to ask you, but before I ask you some of those questions, I want you to maybe dive in a little bit into what you've been working on lately, because I know you added a SaaS component. I know that's big for your company. So I want to pretty much for you to catch up what's changed in WFS from the last time you came on the podcast to today, and then we'll carry on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll start by even addressing the first point with Jeremy. And again, I appreciate his support. We've worked together for a long time over the years. And the bottom line is we do get a lot of love from marketing agencies and media buyers because they depend on us, in these deals. You could be a great marketing team driving awesome lead flow. If you don't have a sales team that knows how to convert, it's going to be hard to get that deal far. We always call it the golden equation. It's very simple. Lead flow times sales performance equals revenue. Now we handle the sales side. We're not done for you marketing, but we can't afford to ignore half the equation. So we're very involved in that marketing piece. We're very collaborative on the pre-conversion side of things. And so when we get these really great marketers that have had horrible experiences with, sales teams and outsourced sales agencies, I just think it makes it really easy for us to shine when we come in and we deliver the level of service that we provide. I'll tell you that some of this is my assumption in just knowing our differentiators, but a lot of it is the feedback that we get. The reason we've built the reputation that we've built is because, and I'm not a fan of bashing competition. I'm just laying out the facts of what I've observed, and it has a lot to do with how I built our company. Is that a lot of these sales agencies are ran by sales guys,
Mm,
and being a great sales leader does not make you a great operator. And it's not just we call it warm body sales, right? You're just throwing warm bodies on a phone, and you're trying to handle the call however you can. It's all the focus is around sales, and I just make a really big or a distinction, excuse me, between sales and sales operations. So what really sets us apart, it's everything that makes your company scale that's related to the sales motion. It's not just salespeople.
mm,
It's the systems, it's the processes, it's the frameworks, it's the methodologies, it's everything else that makes revenue happen, right? Since the last time that we spoke several years ago, and like I said, I think it was 2021 maybe.
yeah.
We've just scaled significantly. I'm a really big fan, not only on our clients and on behalf of our clients, but I practice what I preach in not adding complexity to scale when it's unnecessary, right? I actually had a mentor a really long time ago. He told me scaling is about identifying the most efficient path to scale. Like that is the goal, right? How do you keep and maintain simplicity by tremendous while tremendously increasing revenue?
Mm,
And so we really focus on that with our clients. We'll probably get into it, right? A lot of people ask us, well, how do you get a coaching offer to $1 million a month? A lot of the times it's one or two funnels. In fact, I'll tell you the more funnels and products you add, the harder it is.
mm,
But in that same vein, with our company, I've done the same thing. Like, people ask me, why don't you guys do placements? You're great recruiters. Why don't you offer training services? Why don't you get into other verticals? And it's very simple. Like, I want to specialize and I want to get to a certain level of scale without adding complexity. That
mm.
said, we've
Right.
built so much market share and such a great presence in the education space. We've got a lot of demand from the SaaS industry, and there is the most transferable value between this and SaaS. It's the same type of sale, it's the same sales motion. Our process, our systems are all congruent. We can almost, not quite, but almost copy and paste. And so it's just such a seamless
Mm,
integration into the next vertical. So that
right.
popped on the roadmap early this year.
Josh, I'm guessing you have a lot of calls, a lot of people that think they're ready to work with somebody like you, or they think that they have their offer ready. What are some of the most common like pain points or setbacks do you see people face when wanting to launch their offer or when auditing their offer to see if they're on the right track?
Yeah, interesting question. I don't know if I'm answering it directly, but I'll start by saying this because it's the first thing that comes to mind. We're a scale team, not a validation team. Here's what I mean by that. We're not a 0 to 1 play. What we say, and it comes down to that whole founder led sales process. When somebody first launches an offer, you have to get validation, right? You have to validate before you scale. So you have to make sure that you have product market fit. You have to make sure that you have a customer acquisition model, which is just a fancy way of saying funnel that's working. You have to have your conversion mechanism down. You have to have enough lead flow. You have to show us that people want your product and you have the basics of fulfillment figured out, right?
And sorry to
So,
interrupt for the listeners because we might be talking a little bit high level here. What
yeah,
Josh means by conversion mechanism is in what way are you converting the client? Is it through a call funnel? Is it through a lead form campaign? Is it straight checkout? That's what he means by conversion mechanism. So sorry to interrupt you, Josh.
yeah.
I want to make sure
No,
they follow.
yeah, that's it. Like you have to have a way that you're generating opportunities because, like I said, lead flow times sales performance equals revenue. Now, something that our clients love about us is we're performance based. We don't have any guarantees or monthly minimum retainers. It's all performance based. We eat what we kill because if you're good at sales, that's how it should be. But
Hmm.
that being said, we can't be dragged through the mud if we put a performance only team on a brand that can't generate leads, right? I say this half joking, but it's a true story. Several months back, I had somebody reach out to me and they were saying, thank God, Josh, I heard about you guys through a mastermind. We can't wait to work with you because we can't generate a lead to save our lives. I'm like, well, you got to
It's called
figure that out
Jeremy.
first, man. Yeah, call Jeremy. You got to figure that out first
Yeah.
because, we need people to fill calendars. So to us, typically, it's not a hard line in the sand, but there's something magic that happens between the 100 to 200 grand a month in revenue in this space. For every industry, I'm sure it's different. In the coaching and high ticket info product space, when you're in between 100 to 200 a month, it's that magic thing where it's like, okay, something's working. You have a funnel. People want your offer. People are buying it. You're able to fill calendars. You have fulfillment down. Things are starting to click, and you're getting to a point where you're saying, wow, like I'm the founder, I'm the owner. I can't be on sales calls all day long. Or maybe you have one rep that's been taking all the opportunity and you're having trouble duplicating that person. Now
Right.
you would reach out to somebody like us and would be like, let's go. Let's take that. Let's pour fuel on the fire.
Yeah, so more so the type of people that should be looking into partnering with WFS should have an offer with product market fit. There should already be a conversion mechanism or funnel generating revenue. There should be either already a salesperson or maybe the actual offer owner being on the phone and maybe being at capacity. These are kind of like the things that you look for. So essentially,
Yeah.
kind of very similar to my agency. I don't really work with startups. I essentially want somebody that already has a proven infrastructure and I help them scale that infrastructure. Am I following you correctly?
You're following me correctly. The only thing I would add to that is it's never too late to reach out to me. I don't say this to be cheesy. I have always said this my entire career, even in other businesses. I don't have to win every deal, but I want to earn every relationship. And I do that by adding value. I want to leave everybody better than when I found them. So
Yeah.
maybe you are, only at 20 grand a month or whatever it is, and you're starting out. Still reach out to me. I'll add as much at value as I can. It just means that we might not be able to start an engagement at that point.
Not just yet,
But
yeah.
but I'll tell you, and I'm not an idiot. The reason I do that is because I hope that I could add so much value that I get the call when they're actually in the market for our services. And so
Sure.
I'm pretty strategic about that. But you could reach out to me at any time if you think you will eventually be a good fit for us.
Yeah, and I think that's important, man. It's funny that you brought that up because I have the book right here. Alex talks about it a lot as well. I mean, he warms people up until they're ready for him to partner with them. And I think that
Totally.
building relationships is very important because you never know. Like it's happened to me where I tried to sell a package at my agency to a business and they're not ready. They call me 3 years later, say I could afford your retainer now. So you never know, you know?
You never know. And in this business, man, it can scale so fast. So, some people, if they're not in our industry, I mean, it takes companies literally years sometimes to get from like zero to a few hundred grand a month. In our space, that could be a couple months away. You know, uh,
I was gonna
so
go there
so
next, yeah.
yeah,
So
go
like
ahead.
there's been a misconception that I think I adopted before, and people that I've had conversations in the past that it takes long. It's a needle in a haystack. Not everybody has is able to build these types of offers, and I understand not every offer is good. Some people may think they have a good offer and it sucks, right? But somebody's life could literally change almost overnight if you have the right conversion mechanism, you have the right offer, you're selling it to the right person who has the proper resources and they actually need it at that time, and you could get these things actually done fairly quickly if you have the right resources. So my question to you is it a needle in a haystack to find people that have winning offers, or is it something that you see very often and it's not something that where you're like looking for the chupacabra out here?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. It's not a needle in the haystack. I will say it is harder to find people that have the willingness to do what it takes and check every box, right? So let me back up and define what I mean. One of the biggest lessons I've learned in my entire career is how to evaluate a business model for scalability, right? My first couple of businesses, I always wondered, I was like, if I'm working this freaking hard, why aren't I making more money, or why aren't I scaling as fast as these other industries? And the truth of the matter was I picked the wrong business model. So the business model in the info product space is extremely scalable. You can scale really fast. But there are a lot of people that get into this space and they hear somebody talking about, oh, I heard this person's making X amount of money selling a course or a program. I'm going to start that. And they have the perception or the assumption that they're going to is going to be like passive income for them. Oh yeah, I'm just going to create this thing and throw it online and do nothing with it, and I don't have to actually even be involved, and I'm going to make a bajillion dollars. And at the end of the day, like, it is a real business. You have to treat it like a business. It is a very scalable model, but you have to treat it like a business. You have to be obsessed with the customer. You have to be obsessed with product development. You have to deliver an unparalleled experience. You
Mhm.
have to create the content for prolific marketing and be really good at sales. So there are a lot of people that get into this space with, frankly, the wrong expectations and intentions. But to go back to your question, I really think anyone that has solid expertise, like a real track record and experience to share, If you can bundle that up and sell it, anyone could do this. And I'll tell you that I think limiting beliefs are the biggest thing that hold people back because we have clients that do a lot of revenue and you've never even heard of them. Not in like a rude way, because I really respect these people, but I'm saying for
You
as a
wouldn't know who they are.
description,
Yeah.
they're a
Yeah.
nobody. They're you never even heard of them before, and they're just, they're killing it. So it just anyone could do it, but you got to do the work. It won't do it itself.
What are some of the besides having, taking action fast, besides being willing to check boxes and learn and, have a certain amount of revenue a month, what winning characteristics do you usually look for in the people that you look to partner with?
Well, first of all, I really look for alignment. This is something that as I've become more mature in business and later in my career, I've owned my own businesses for over a decade now. I've had quite a few different ones. So I have a lot of experience. One thing that I really used to discount, I didn't put enough weight or stock into it, was the alignment piece, right? A cultural fit. How well do I enjoy working with these people? And like literally today, Alex, and I don't say this because I've like made it and I'm just making so much money it doesn't matter. That's not the case. I just know I'd rather have my peace of mind. So I turn down deals if I don't want to work with the person, just because the
It's a
impact that
blessing
has on
though.
our team.
It's a good
What's
thing though
that?
to be there. It's a good thing to be there, to be able to choose what you want to do and what you don't want to do. That shows that you have the right systems, the right structures in place, that you've actually done it correctly.
If you work with somebody that is going to disrespect you or not treat your team with respect or just have unrealistic expectations, I am convinced, I believe that you will lose money from that somehow. It could be because it's draining too much energy, so you don't serve your other clients as well. It could be because you're just taking up capacity when you could have put it somewhere else.
Right.
I just don't enjoy those things. It affects my mood. So I'm really in tune with that and I pay attention to that. So the first thing is just expectations. Who are they as people? Are they integrity based? Integrity is a big part. I'll tell you this, like we're really compliantly selling is really important to us. I don't want to sell anything I don't believe can actually achieve the result and the outcome. And they need to show me evidence and support that they can get their clients the outcome they say they can.
Right.
If they don't have an integrity based product, I don't want to touch it. Now, there's some people out there that don't care about that. And I'm not here on this podcast to judge them, but I'm just saying the people that align with that, they can hire them.
Yeah.
So we have to look for those beliefs and those ethics. How fast do they want to scale? How much do they care about compliance because we sell compliantly? How good is their fulfillment and how much do they put into that? All of these variables come into play, and then really like they have to be great at content. They have to be willing to create a lot of content. And then they have to trust us to do what we do, right? That's a
Right.
long answer to a short question.
No, that was a great answer, man. Um, Let me ask you a question. This is something that's been on my mind for some time, and I really wanted to ask you it. It's you have your high ticket offer. In my specific case, I'm going to launch a high ticket offer in the high end restaurant space, 7 and 8 figure
Okay.
restaurants, right? Helping them get to those numbers, and I'm talking monthly,
Mm,
right? Um, for these types of restaurants, in my specific case, I'm putting my conversion mechanism is a call funnel. Okay. Um, I'm running ads from Facebook, Instagram to call funnel. And I guess the question is, at what point or how do you determine whether you're going to go down a one call or a two call close model? For somebody that's just new to this, how should I approach looking at that or dissecting that?
yeah. Good question. Call models are something that I've spent a lot of time studying, and I still look at a lot of data around that. To put this into like really simple terms, if it should be a one call close or a two call close format, it really depends on the lead themselves. Is
Like how
it an
educated they
offer?
are?
How educated, I'm going to tell you it in a few different ways. How educated they are is one, level of awareness is another, how in market they are, and how simplistic your offer is to comprehend and make a commitment to. And so, what I mean by that is when we talk about lead quality, it's so easy for people to say, oh, lead quality, how much money does somebody have? Financial capability is one component. But let me ask you this, Alex, if a billionaire landed on your calendar and didn't own a restaurant, would you call them qualified?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I mean, no, they probably don't care what you have to say, and they're not even looking for your product. So that tells us that financial capability isn't it. They have to be in market, meaning that it's a service that could actually, appeal or relate to them. And then it has to do with the level of awareness and interest. Because I'll tell you this, if somebody's been researching how to scale their restaurant for, the past several months, that's going to be very different than someone that just thought of it for the very first time when they saw your ad.
Right.
So the basic concept around this is if you can get a very high level of certainty, or sorry, excuse me, of awareness with the leads by the time they show up to the call, and it's what we call CPR, which stands for clear path to revenue, or in some cases clear path to result. If you have a very direct CPR, meaning that they can comprehend everything they need to make that decision on that one call, then you would usually want to do that in a one call close format. The only other consideration I would say has to do with show up rate. So if you have a or excuse me, I think I'm saying it backwards. If you have a high show up rate, then maybe you would want to go for a one call close. If you have a really low show up rate, then you here's why. I'm not making it clear on the show rate. Here's why. So if you have a really high show rate and they have a really high level of awareness, the reason you can let's talk about the reason you can do a one call close. You have to make it a longer call. It's an hour. That would be an hour long call. So that's another mistake people get wrong. It's not a 30-minute call and you decide to do a one call or a two call. If you're doing a one call close, you typically need a longer call, so call it an hour. But if you have a really low show rate and all of your sales team's calendars are booked for an hour, imagine the amount of downtime that you would have.
Mm.
So typically to mitigate against that, you want to have shorter calls, call it 30 minutes. Sometimes you'll even go all the way down to a pre-call or a triage that's 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, in a 30-minute window to mitigate the downtime that you have, because it's all about rep efficiency, you're not going to usually have enough time in that instance to do a one call close. Okay? So to summarize all of that, if you have a high show rate and a high level of awareness with a clear path to the results, then you can go for a one call close.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Pretty
And
clear.
so
Yeah.
I think it might make sense for me to define CPR real quick. Would you like me to?
Please. Yeah.
So CPR is a term that I've just really obsessed around when I evaluate the scalability of offers because it stands for, like I said, it could be either clear path to revenue or clear path to results. It's how direct the outcome is compared to their investment. And a lot of the times it has to do with the believability, the level of believability or the level of perceived probability that they will get the achieved outcome or the desired outcome that they're investing into. The higher that is, the more clear that the path to the result is, the faster people convert. The shorter the sales cycle is because it's such a no brainer. There's such low risk. There's such high certainty that they think, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. Why wouldn't I? So I'll give you an example of something with a really low CPR that I've worked with. It was a land development program. So we're selling land development. Now, the actual method that they taught, it was like the average took like 3 years to complete their first deal. So when you're selling a program like that, people are comparing that to the 3 year timeline that it would potentially take, even if they did everything right to be successful, as opposed to something else where they're showing that they're getting that return within 30 days, right?
Yeah.
So that factors in because the more complex or the more comprehensive the decision is, the more they need to think about it. And so if you try to close them prematurely, they're not ready to actually make that decision.
Understood. Now, let's say we're in a one call close model. Our CPR is clear. The salesperson, whether it's the offer owner, whether it's somebody that you brought on, what kind of negotiation freedom should that person have? Let's say it's not the offer owner. Let's say it's a salesperson who's been placed. How do
Yeah.
you determine how much freedom they have in regards to negotiating pricing or, adding additional deliverables, etc.?
Yeah, really great question. And I'm going to start by answering it in terms of how much flexibility they have in going for the one call close. And then we'll talk about flexibility over offers and stuff you just said.
Okay.
So, if it's set up to be a two-part close, they almost are like don't have any flexibility to go for a close in the first call because, like I said, there's not even enough time usually,
Yeah.
so that almost never happens. But let's say it's a one call close setup. There is a lot of times where a experienced salesperson will still set up a follow-up call and they will not try to close that person on the first call. And there's a lot of things I could go into, but to give you a really short answer, it has to do with what we call commitment questions that happen before transitioning into the pitch. And so essentially, it's like a temperature check. We also refer to it as heat indexing, seeing how hot the lead is. Are they hot to trot? Are they ready to go? Or do we need to push out? So if we go into these commitment questions in this pre-pitch sequence, and we can tell that this lead is really not in the pocket, they don't have enough interest where we feel confident that they're going to say yes when we pitch this to them. A lot of the times we would push a follow-up call because they need more nurturing. Maybe we share some content in between the calls. We're not going to go for a close right there if we have a really good feeling that they're not going to convert. Does that make sense? You muted yourself, Alex.
My apologies. It does make sense. And when it comes to the, let's say that you had that first call, you felt like they aren't quite there, and you maybe want to follow up with another call, and then in between the call, you want to have contextual, maybe email sequences, to warm
Yep.
them up a little bit more. What is that hook to get them to want to be on that second call if you already see there's little interest on the first?
Yeah, well, we'd have to define little interest because if there's such little interest that it doesn't make sense to continue a sales cycle or a sales process, then we would say that at that, like if we were asking questions like, hey man, let me just ask you this. If I was able to show you something that could do X, Y, Z, is that something you'd be interested in? And they said no. We're not going to continue the process. We're going to try to find out and dig deeper why that's the answer. But ultimately, we'll say, hey, well, at this point in time, then, this is how we help people. I don't want to push something on someone that really isn't the right fit. But at the same time, I don't think it really makes sense to continue the dialogue. What can I do to serve you right now? And then you'd push them to some type of nurturing content. Maybe it's a low ticket, maybe it's a video, free resource, whatever it is. But we're not going to bloat our pipeline and spend a bunch of time with people that are the wrong fit. Now, let's just say that it's above that, but they're not ready to convert, and we set up a follow up call. Something that I feel like very few organizations pay enough attention to is how intentional they are with the follow up window. So, are you familiar with the concept of speed to lead?
I think you've talked about it before, but it's
Yeah.
not fresh in my
It's
mind.
very simple. Like if somebody opts in and you reach out and get a hold of them within, 5 to 10 minutes of them opting in, your connection rate is tremendously higher rather than, a few hours later because
Next day.
they're defined as what's called peak interest.
Yeah.
You're never as interested in something than you are when you fill it out. It's like you are interested enough to take the action, try to get a hold of them as close to that as possible. But what I think people don't realize is the same thing happens in a sales process and a discovery. So if you do a really good discovery, you're expanding the gap, but then you're also amplifying desire. So a really good salesperson through the discovery process is amplifying the amount of interest somebody has. The further away you get from that call, the more the interest dissipates, right? It goes away. Same like speed to
Right.
lead. So many times when I see organizations or if we go in and take over a sales team, I'll see amazing first call. Well, I don't always see amazing first calls, but let's say I see an amazing first call and then they set the follow up for like a week or two
Mm.
later and people ghost them or, it falls. I mean, they have a very low conversion rate on that. So the idea is if you have to set up a follow up, you're still trying to do it within the next 24 to 48 hours, and you're treating that like it's an objection. So, and this is something even recently we had to put a much greater emphasis on again that, more than we had in the past because we're like, dude, you people are being so lax. They're just asking the lead. When does it make sense to touch base again instead of really locking them down for the next day or two? That one thing makes a massive difference because now they're still at that peak interest of everything that you just went over. In a week or two, they forgot what you talked about in the discovery call,
Yeah.
right? So that's really, really important. And so, but the point is, if that's I think I answered the question, but that's when they would decide if they should put them into a follow up when you try to keep it as close together as possible.
Yeah.
Now, if in terms of like offer pricing, inclusions, things like that, what I'll tell, and if you have a specific example, I'd be happy to break it down. But typically, it's very, very stringent. And the reason why, and we have a lot of sales reps, and we've ran sales for a long time. No matter how great the sales rep is, if you don't put a very clear, non-subjective rule in place of when they can offer what, sales reps take the path of least resistance. So, as an example, if you have a discount that they're able to use and you don't tell them specifically when and how they can use it, you'll start seeing them use the discount way more often.
Yeah.
So, anytime that we have some sort of special incentive, we put a really hard rule in place. And we're basically like, if we ever hear this on your call, you're not doing it inside of these rules, and we're going to have a conversation and it won't be good.
Good. Okay. So I'm guessing that better question.
Yep.
Let's say it's a 10K offer. What is the most flexibility? What is the average amount of flexibility? Is it a 10%? Is it 15%? Is it 500 off? Is it 1,000 off? What's the best practice?
We don't usually give any flexibility. The
Okay.
price is the price. And listen, I'm not going to say that anybody that allows discounts doesn't have integrity because there's all sorts of reasons. You could justify business goals, whatever it is. But I think integrity needs to be questioned. And if you're just, if you're just have an approach to get the most amount of money out of people and there's really no difference, I don't like that. It doesn't feel right to me. So our price points are our price points. But you ask the question of best practice. Typically, the best practice is to give a discount or an incentive for a fast action bonus. That really helps. You give it to everyone the same exact way. They know about it. And you would say something like, hey, by the way, like just because we get really busy and we have a lot of calls and there's a lot of people that are curious but not necessarily serious and we spend a lot of time with them before they end up making a decision, we understand that it saves us a lot of time and it's a benefit to you. So if you're able to make this decision within the next 48 hours, we'll give you a what we call our fast action bonus. It's $1,000 off or whatever it is. And that really helps the pipeline velocity. So that's a
Mm.
regular practice we use a lot.
That's a golden nugget right there, man. You're a poet. You're a poet. The way you frame that shit, you're so good with it, man.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know about that, but I'll tell you this, like that's one of the hardest things when you have an evergreen offer is how do you create urgency?
yeah,
And I'll tell you this, what we typically teach, which is a lot more important. This is what I'm about to say is way more important than external pressure or discounts or incentives or anything like that. When you talk about the concept of urgency, that's a sales rep's responsibility. And you have to use internal urgency. And internal urgency comes from the level of conviction they have that your offer will solve their problems and get them to their desired state and the pain points that you were able to dial in during your discovery, right? If you don't know their pain points and their core desires, it's going to be hard to create urgency.
yeah,
But that is what's going to be most responsible for creating that urgency and having a strategic set of questions to get them to admit that and see that.
right.
Because if I tell you, Alex, if you're telling me, you know, there's this thing that's the most important thing for you to solve and it would make you x amount of money if you solved it or it would save you x amount of headache if you solved it and it's your number one priority and if you don't do this right now you don't even know how else you would solve it. If I took you through that entire sequence and then you say no, it's going to be really I'm like what?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
did everything you just tell me, like, was that none of that true? You just said it
yeah.
was the biggest priority ever. So urgency comes from a really strong discovery, and it's the internal motivation. However, the last piece of pushover for external for people that are sitting on the fence is like, hey, listen, I'm never going to push somebody into doing something that isn't the right fit. But I'll tell you, if you can make this decision within the next 48 hours, we'll give you $1,000 off. And that really helps when it's an evergreen offer where there's no start date because they could technically do it whenever they want.
I love that. Now, for the when I do the so usually the way that my calls go at the marketing agency are they're one call close models for the most part. There's people that need to, figure it out, whatever. We'll have another second or third call. With this, if I was to have a salesperson in place for more volume, more leads coming in, because the way I close the deals now at the agency, they're either referrals or they found me on the podcast and they're pretty warmed up, right? But it's going to be different
Yeah.
when I'm going to be bringing people from direct response ads. Now, let's say I'm the salesperson. I'm on the call. It's the first call. Person seems pretty ready to go. I have an agreement. I have a DocuSign. Is it best practice to pull up the DocuSign, show it to them, and have them sign on the spot? Do you get objections? Oh, I need my attorney to look at it. This is kind of long. I don't know if I can make this decision right now. How do you handle those objections?
Yeah. Can I address the first part that you asked first?
Sure, yeah.
You said, you started explaining your marketing agency and their one call closes. First of all, like you said, warm traffic and referrals converts very, very different than cold traffic because the element of trust isn't built, and
Yeah.
we're in a trust deficit right now,
Hmm.
right? There's just
100%.
so many people online that can't do what they say they can. So people are very skeptical, especially in the info product space, right? Because it's such a scalable business model. Anyone can start this type of business. And so, unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that have horrible fulfillment. We steer clear of those people, but it's why the trust deficit exists. But there's also something outside of trust it's really important to explain. You're talking about B2B, Alex. B2B is what I call an active practitioner. They're already in the space, they're doing the thing. What a really big difference with B2B. Not always, there's still levels of awareness like any funnel, but comparatively to B2C, B2B people are usually problem aware and solution aware comparatively. Obviously, there's still varying levels of interest and awareness, but comparatively. So a lot of the times they get on the call, they know what their problems are. That's why they booked the call, and they know the type of solution, and they just need to feel confident that you have it. So they can be much sort of shorter sales cycles. Now, I'll say they could also be much longer sales cycles if it's like committee based decision making and depending on the price point and all these things. But let's ignore that for a second. The confidence is so much higher because they're already looking for a very specific solution in most cases. In B2C, high ticket B2C, what everyone needs to realize and understand is people don't really care what your offer is. They have a set of pain points they want to solve, and they have a desired state that they want to achieve, and they don't give a shit how they get there. And I'll give you an example of this. I can't tell you how many times we've had, because we sell a bunch of different offers. We've had a lead looking at potentially buying a business and then buys or an offer to learn how to buy a business and then buys one of our other programs on how to start an Airbnb portfolio. And then and that happens all the time with like all sorts of random, and you're like, wait, this guy didn't even choose like a different business buying offer. They chose something completely different because all they cared about was their core desires, the pain points they have, and their desired state. And somebody else showed them a better way to accomplish that with a higher CPR, like I was saying earlier.
Gotcha.
So that's the big difference with B2B and B2C. The talk tracks are different, the sales process is different. There's a lot of differences with how you would handle those people.
Now,
Makes sense?
yeah, it does make sense. Now, for the agreement side, do you get objections there? Is what I
Yeah.
mentioned even a problem that you run into?
Yeah. So first of all, it's not a big problem, but I could speak to it in a few different ways. So what we typically do is they make a payment, and then when they make the payment, it triggers some sort of like auto email to them with the DocuSign.
Ah, there you go. That's
Yeah.
that's what I was looking for.
That's what we typically do. It's not a big enough issue for me to even like be able to tell you the problems we've run into because it just happens so rarely. There is a very small percentage of people that will want to review it, and a very very small percentage of people that will say they want their attorney to look at it. And the way we handle that is very similar to SaaS, where we say, hey, listen, we're a service business. We have hundreds or thousands of customers. We don't do red lines, but if there is something like highly specific you're concerned about, we'll do our best to accommodate and make you feel comfortable. And most every time, we're able to just explain why they shouldn't be concerned with it.
Yeah, I think you answered my question perfectly, Josh. I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
What are some non-negotiable metrics you track daily to know your sales team is moving the needle?
So I mean, all the
In the case
basics,
of an
right?
offer like this, one two call close model, B2B, 10K offer, you know, wealthy individuals who own like, 7, 8 figure a month restaurants.
Yeah. So it's a hard question because we track everything and
Okay.
all the metrics are important in their own way. The basics are, but I'm going to speak to a couple that are extremely important. The basics are close rate, show rate. Um, those are like the basic ones that you look at for a sales team. On the setter side, you're looking at number of dials, connection rate, set rate, close from sets rates, things like that. But I'm going to tell you a couple that I think are a lot more important. Because what I think happens is people get sort of confused. So, like, those two metrics don't tell you the entire equation. And it's actually funny, the amount of times, Alex, I've taken over a sales team because the way that our model works is they have to have validation. So they usually have some sales team in place. A lot of the times we'll assume them. They'll come over and they'll work on the same offer, but for us, and then we'll staff obviously above and beyond that. I can't tell you how many times an owner or one of our clients will tell us who they think is the best rep, and when we actually get behind the scenes and see the numbers, they're not the best rep. But they look at these vanity metrics, and here's my point: they'll say, "Oh, well, this rep has a 30% close rate, and the rest have 20." Well, yeah, but when we look into it, for whatever reason, this rep's show rate is tremendously lower. So they're still generating less revenue per call, right? I'll give you another example. Oh, well, this rep has the highest close rate. Yeah, but their average sales price and their collection rate is way lower than all the other reps. So the key, what is called a keystone metric, which is a metric that tells you like the entire story. The keystone metrics that we like to look at that are my favorite that I obsess over are gross dollars per booked call and collected dollars per booked call, because you can see the overall efficiency of the entire operation. So marketers like yourself, you're used to looking at things on a ROAS basis, return on ad spend,
Mhm.
right? But
Yeah.
you can do that on an incremental rep level to decide how profitable they are for you. So all you look at is GPDBC, if I'm saying that right, gross dollars per booked call. It's exactly that. How much revenue did they generate from the calls that were booked on their calendar? And so let's say that your average call is $200 per call and they have an $800
And that's for
GDPBC.
people that show up, right? Obviously, like you divide
No,
by the people that actually showed up.
no.
No?
It's per booked call, not live call. So to distinguish between the two, booked call is all calls they get. Live call is how many of them showed up.
Okay.
We do it on booked call. Why? Because we want to see how good people are with show rate and following up with their pipeline. And there's so much revenue leakage that happens in between there. So we want to look on the actual booked call basis. So if your average cost per call is $200 and your rep has an $800, which is their gross dollar per booked call, that's a 4x ROAS on an incremental rep level.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes
So
sense.
if we look at those keystone metrics, we understand the entire equation on a rep by rep basis rather than getting confused on, well, close rate's higher, but show rate's lower, or close rate's higher, but collections is lower. If you just look at gross dollars and collected dollars per booked call, then it tells the whole story.
Thank you, Josh. Now, you talked a little bit about follow-up process there, show-up rates. What does your follow-up process look like for no-shows or soft maybes, and how many touch points is maybe too many?
Say it one more time. The process for no shows and soft maybes, you said?
Yeah. So people, let's just stick to no-shows. What does your no-show process look like, and how do you know when you're following up too many times and you just need to hang it up?
So we look at statistics to tell us this answer, and data to tell us this answer. So this gets a little bit complex because when you don't have a big sales team, usually your closers are following up with all the no shows. When you hit a certain level of scale, now you want to maximize efficiency. And revenue efficiencies across your team. So you want your closers only focus on the highest leverage activities, and chasing no shows is not one of them. So
Mhm.
we actually have a button where, when the closers press it, they did not show up, it will transfer into a setter's pipeline and they're dialing the no shows. Their cadence is set up based on how many touch points we statistically know we would get a hold of somebody within, which is usually roughly 5 on any offer. So meaning there's diminishing returns. If you call somebody 50 times, You're not going to get that many incremental more like calls out of it, and you're going to annoy some people. So the cadence varies, but typically on a no-show cadence or a dialing cadence, it's like 4 to 5 times they're going to try to re-engage that lead, right? Now, that's calls. They would also usually have a text every other day and an email every other day. So call it 10 touch points if you count every type. Now, on follow ups, when you said soft maybes, that's very different. We have a training that we teach our reps called commitment based follow up. Here's the difference: there's two types of follow up. Usually, people don't differentiate between the two. Interest based follow up is when you're following up with leads to generate interest. That's a setter motion. Commitment based follow up is when they're engaged in the sales process and you're following up with them to gain a commitment. So they're actively engaged in a sales cycle. So for commitment based follow up, we measure something called the quality of the delay. And here's how it goes: how qualified or what is the quality of the reason they're delaying? Because if there's a really low quality delay, we're going to push to close the deal because we know it's not a realistic objection. It's a stall objection. They're just kicking the can down the road, and we don't want to waste our time with tire kickers. So we really try to train our sales team to assess and measure the quality of the delay. Now, here's a good example of a highly qualified or highly high quality delay. If they say, listen, at the end of the day, I want to do this, but I'm waiting. I'm only going to do this if I close this deal and the contract's out and I'm supposed to have it signed next week. Random situation, but if that's the case, are you really going to try to slam close them right now? Like, it doesn't make sense because it's not even useful to them if they don't do that thing they said.
Right.
So we'll schedule that follow up for the time that's appropriate. Now, the last thing that I'll say, so you're always measuring the quality of the delay. That really it's not a like 5 times, Alex. That's not how it goes. You really have to qualitatively feel it out and assess it. But we also gauge what's called a buying window. And so if that lead straight up tells us, or we learn that they're not even trying to make a buying decision within 60 to 90 days, we mark them lost and we let marketing continue to nurture them. Sales reps should not waste their valuable time chasing leads that aren't at least within a couple months of making that buying decision. If they are making a buying decision within that window of time, set a follow up every few weeks just to keep and maintain connectivity. And then you could be more serious when you get closer. So lots of details, man, but
Thank
it's a
you.
big
No, man,
concept.
you unpacked that beautifully. What should we be qualifying for in the type form if the conversion mechanism is a call funnel that would make sales calls easier and faster to close outside of announcing the price point of your product or service?
All right. So when it comes to applications, what people really need to understand is that the purpose of the application is for lead scoring and segmentation. Generally, most of the time, well, and you might, if you're in a B2B space or you have a more complex offer with real qualifications, then like sometimes you need information that you can reference on the call as well. But most people in the info space are using it for qualification, lead scoring, segmentation purposes. So now this depends on your methodology around lead scoring because as I alluded to earlier, financial capability is not the only thing that impacts lead quality. We also like to gauge level of awareness and interest. So on a more sophisticated level, what we're looking for is we're trying to gauge propensity. And propensity is like it's their readiness to buy something, the probability that they'll convert. We're trying to gauge propensity. And so you can do that by basically saying how long they've considered making that decision, how long they've been following you, how long they've been looking into this type of solution. That will sort of tell you the level of awareness and like how long they've been considering that, which would lead to higher levels of propensity, right? And then financial capability is important only as it relates to the actual price point and their ability to buy it, right? Now, I'll tell you, there's softwares out there today where if you just want to do financial capability, you could use a tool and they don't even have to, data enhancement. They don't even need to fill out the application. But the long story short is we try to see financial capability related to the price point of the offer, the level of awareness and interest they have, so we know that they're ready and qualified to go to a closer. And there's 3 basic segmentation points. If they're highly qualified, they go straight to a closer's calendar. If they're semi-qualified, meaning they could be a good shot, but we can't really tell because they're kind of in the middle, a lot of the times those will go to a setter's calendar. They'll pre-qualify and put them back to a closer. And if they're not qualified at all, they don't even talk to a setter because it's calendar bloat on a lower level. So we just push them to a low ticket nurturing type of thing.
I love it. Now, what's your favorite way to flip? We've tried this before and it didn't work into a win.
Flip what into a win?
We've tried this before and it didn't work.
What
Objection.
what did you try before? Oh, sorry, you're saying that's the actual objection. We
Yeah,
tried
that's
this
the
before.
objection. So I am a restaurant owner and I'm on the phone with you, Josh. You're a marketer, and I'm like, Josh, this sounds great, but everybody's told me this before. I've hired a bunch of marketing agencies. They
Yeah.
all take forever, and I end up back at the same place. What's the difference with you?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you said that because that's exactly what we found most people's experience was or is, which is why we ended up starting this offer. And I'll be able to break down all of that in a second on why what we do is very different than probably the things that you've experienced in the past. But just so I understand, because I don't want to assume, what is the experience that you had before? Can you tell me a little bit about what they tried? From there, Alex, we start unpacking what they had about that experience, and then really you have to learn what the actual information and experience is, and then hopefully you have real differentiators that later you're going to be able to say, yeah. So earlier you were telling me that you hired this marketing agency. Now I asked you, Alex. I said, hey, do they specialize in hotels or do they specialize in restaurants? You told me no. I told you, do they have experience doing XYZ? And you were saying not really. And so, from my perspective, you had the right idea, but you hired somebody that really didn't know what they were doing because they didn't specialize in this niche. And there's a lot of nuances. So,
Yeah.
what we do is blah, blah, blah. So, it really comes down to differentiating. But the first step to any objection is I'll tell you the steps. Number one is listen and clarify. Number two is diffuse sales resistance. Number three is going to be isolate. Number four is going to be overcome, and number five is tie down. So you have to first listen and clarify. You have to seek to understand, right?
That's your call
Once
structure that you're breaking down, right? The five.
that's our objection framework.
Okay, objection framework.
Yeah. Listen and clarify. Number two is diffuse. We say diffuse in something else, but diffuse in something. You're just basically diffusing the objection. And the example is, hey, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. Thanks so much for being transparent. And yeah, that is something that we've heard from a lot of other people. So that would be a good example of diffusing
Bring it
it.
down, yeah.
Number three is isolating it. So you'd say something like, Alex, that's totally understandable. I guess one of the things I'd want to know, and we're going to unpack this here in a second, but if I could understand what you've done in the past and you could see this as kind of a night and day difference, it sounds like you're saying that you are still open to a solution. It's probably why you're on this call. And the only reason you really would be hesitant is because you're afraid it's like the thing that you did in the past. Is that right? They say, yeah, that's right. Then you overcome the objection. And then, that makes sense. And then you tie them down and say, so I know you were saying that this is something that you would still be open to doing as long as you had a high level of confidence that this wasn't, the things you did in the past.
Right.
I think I showed you that. Are you pretty confident that this would get you a different result based on the different strategy that we do? Yeah, yeah, I'm confident. Okay, and just to confirm, you would be confident moving forward on something like this because you could see that it's very different than the things that you tried in the past that didn't work. Yeah, I am. Okay, perfect. And then you move on.
Got it.
Right. So that's what it means to overcome and tie down.
Josh, you have a lot of content out there. Do you have any content out there that the listeners could take a look at when it comes to call structure? Because I remember you gave a presentation at Jeremy's Mastermind. I think it was like a year or two back, and you talked about you bring up pricing first to make sure that you're clear and that you're not wasting an hour like breaking something down for them to tell you that's outside of the price point. What
Sorry, hold
I
on a
usually do
second.
is I
What?
go I go that route, and then immediately I start pretty much dissecting what their problems are. I don't talk about me or what my solutions are, but more so what problems do you have? What issues have you dealt with before when working with people like me? And then once they've broken those things down, then I jump into either case studies or things that I know relate to what they're looking for. Do you have any type of resources out there or anything that we could look at when it comes to call structures?
Um, I want to clarify one thing. And by the way, let me go backwards. It's listen intently, clarify and diffuse, isolate, overcome, and tie down. Sorry, I confused the first two words.
You're
That's
good,
our
man.
framework that we teach. But no, I got to tell you, Alex, I don't know if I'm misremembering a specific example you're referring to, or if you're confusing that because I would almost never lead with the price straight out on a phone call, because there's no value attached to it. Like if you're going to get a lot of people that are basically saying no, and you're going to trigger great sales resistance if you haven't first
Really?
really opened up their mind to the
Well, thanks
to
for
the perceived
clarifying. Yeah,
value.
maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, man. So, okay. So that's good to hear. That's something that I need to cut out then.
Yeah, if you're just leading with the price point on the call, I would not. There's a lot of people that are going to be turned away right off the bat because here's the thing. You have to have enough context to figure out the monetary value of their
Of their
problems,
problem.
and you have to have the opportunity to really like amplify to the desire and show them like how much value this would be worth to them. When you
Right.
don't go through a whole conversation with that with really strategic questions, if you just say that right out the bat, they're going to react to whatever information they already have before coming into that call. And we all know that a great sales rep is supposed to give them better information to influence their perception. So I would never
Mhm.
lead with that on a call. I think
I think
there
I
must
may,
have
you know
been
what
like a,
happened? I may be mistaken it with somebody else's presentation. Probably on the same day. And I'm glad you clarified
yeah.
that because I can't be doing that shit. That's why we're talking here today. Thank you, bro.
No, that's a
That's
horrible
horrible advice.
strategy. Yeah, like I said, everything has nuances. There could be a hyper specific situation where it could make sense.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I would definitely advise against that. But I don't have anything out there, Alex. I'm starting to do a lot more of these podcasts, which has been fun for me. A lot more people have been reaching out about that. If you're
Yeah.
listening to this right now and you have a podcast or know someone that does, I'd love to be on it. But but no, I don't have like a video breaking that down. If you want, we can go through that right now.
Yeah, let's make that the last question and we'll get out of your hair, man. I know you got a bunch of stuff to do.
Sure. So, yeah, I'll break down kind of the call framework, and I'll do it in a generic's not the right word, but I'll do it in a high level view because it could get pretty detailed.
Yeah.
But the basic idea is we have something we call the 10 steps to wires from strangers, right? And so we have pre connectivity, which is how you're starting to warm them up even before you get on the call with them. That's not always a salesperson, sometimes it is. Number two is warm up. So, right when they get on the phone, you're doing a warm up with them because you want to establish some basic rapport. You don't want to be cheesy and inauthentic, but you don't want to just jump into, all right, let's start. So, there's a little bit of warm up. Step three is an agenda frame where you're basically going over the framework for the call and what they can kind of expect out of the call. There's some sales trainers out there that will say that this creates sales resistance. I am an adamant I am adamantly like against that. Like it can be done really well if done correctly. Step four is a discovery process. Step five is an information confirmation. Step six is creating a what we call a buying window, which is essentially making sure we don't get the time objection because it's so common. Step seven is a closing deck. Eight is a trial close. Step nine is gaining the commitment, and 10 is closing. So that's our 10 steps to wires from framework. Sorry, 10 steps to wires
From Stranger Framework.
from strangers framework. I'm getting confused. Now within that though, in a talk track, we would break down the discovery the most. And so in the discovery, so we have our agenda frame where we're strategically explaining the call. If you do it correctly, you could really decrease sales resistance because you're letting them know they're in the right place. It's not going to be salesy. There's not going to be a lot of pressure. You're getting their buy-in that, going through these discovery questions will actually help us better help them. So there's a lot of great ways to do it. You're letting them know, hey, I'm going to make sure you get all your questions answered, and you do that so they don't start talking over you in the discovery. And another thing a lot of the times I'll do in the agenda frame is bring just a base level of awareness to the type of solution we have so they know they're in the right place. And if they know they're in the right place, they're typically more patient to wait to the end of the call to hear everything about the offer. In the discovery questions, we find out their current state versus their desired state. We go over like gap awareness. A lot of this stuff is first principles to sales, and there's even some of the main sales trainers out there, their frameworks I've seen are very congruent to us. We have some nuances in how we go about them, but then you have gap awareness questions, solution awareness questions, consequence questions, commitment questions. Then we do what's called an information confirmation, where you're basically repeating everything back to them with a little bit of hot sauce. You're emphasizing the pain points. You're making their desired state really clear to them. And you're getting their commitment confirming the information and you're segueing smoothly into the pitch. So you recap it and you say, hey, if all of these things are true and I'm able to show you XYZ, it sounds like that's something you're interested in. They say yes. Then you go into the buying window and you're basically tying down a couple more commitment questions. Then you do the pitch and then you go into a closing framework. So that's
Okay.
like the very high level. There's a lot of nuances within that, but that's the very high level overview of how we would design our talk tracks.
Josh, last question. How do you want to be remembered?
Oh man, dude, I'm not like philosophical like that. I don't know. Uh, I don't know how I want to be remembered. I know how I want to what I want to be known for, which is a little different. I'm not really thinking like legacy type shit, but I want to be known for being one of the greatest sales operators in the space, somebody that people know is extremely strategic and intentional. And I'm not just a sales guy. Like I truly understand sales operations, financial modeling, scaling intelligence at the deepest level possible. And yeah, I just want to be known and trusted for building very high intensity sales teams.
I appreciate that, Josh. Where's the best place to connect with you? What social medias, websites? Where can people check out more of your work and see if maybe they could be a good fit for you?
Yeah, so I'm starting to do a lot more speaking stuff. Like we said, I'm speaking at the mastermind this weekend. I've been on more podcasts. That's where I'm going to start being a lot more intentional about that for content. The best place to connect with me would be my Instagram. It's troy.joshua. My name's Josh Troy, just to be very clear, but everyone gets confused on that. That's my Instagram. Yeah, shoot me a message if you're looking for advice, any tips. Let me know if you saw the episode. I'd be happy to connect with anybody there.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate your time, man. All right, y'all. This is Hustle Inspires Hustle. Alex Quin, Josh Troy. Second episode, hopefully not the last. We'll see you on the next episode.